Welcome and thank you for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored, and we appreciate you staying up late with us. First up on The Factor, we start off tonight's show talking about a grueling situation. A 12-year-old girl is accused of smothering and killing her 8-year-old cousin over an iPhone on July 15th in Humboldt, Tennessee. They were both visiting their grandmother's house. Now, according to the county's prosecutor, a security camera recorded the killing inside the bedroom the young girl shared. The recording shows the older child using bedding to suffocate her cousin as she slept in the top bunk. After the child died, the 12-year-old cleaned up the victim and repositioned her body in bed.
Carl Newton Mahan, a 6-year-old from Paintsville, Kentucky. Carl, with his friend Cecil Van Hoos, age 8, were doing what many boys in rural Kentucky did: foraging for items they might sell for a few pennies to a junk dealer. When young Carl discovered a piece of scrap iron that may be worth a few cents, Van Hoos, who was older and bigger, seized it from him. Mahan became enraged, stormed into his house, and climbed a chair to retrieve his father's shotgun. He dashed back outside, pointed it at his companion, and pulled the trigger. According to Van Hoos's death certificate, 19 pellets were administered, and he survived less than 10 minutes. Newton Mahan was arrested and prosecuted almost soon, on May 23rd, because his guilt was undeniably clear. Mrs. Manuel Fitzpatrick, the only adult witness to the shooting, overheard the boys arguing, and Mahan threatened to kill his friend if he didn't give it up. Young Mahan reportedly laughed and talked with his pals during his trial, unaware of the gravity of the situation. He was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in the reformatory.
Hey people, David here, and today I'm going to be making a video kind of proving why children are not sinless and let alone innocent. But I'm also going to be opening your eyes to how the Lord thinks of children the best way I can. Because I see a lot of people that really think that babies, children, and everything else is sinless until this age of accountability. Now, with the introduction of this video, you can see where children were actually able to commit crimes, and a lot of people would be thinking, how can a child commit a crime? How are children able to do things evil? And the only solution to me is that that evil is embedded in them, because not all evil actions are taught. There's people who've had sons who grew up to rape people. They weren't taught that. Their parents didn't teach them. Ever since Adam's fall, we have all been inherently sinful. And I'm going to back that up. I've been doing a lot of studying before this video to prove that these children, people say there's an age of accountability. I'm going to prove to you that an age of accountability does not exist. And the reason I say it doesn't exist is because a lot of people think the age of accountability should be 13. Or whenever a person becomes consciously aware that they're sinning. But with a sin nature, you're bound to sin. It's inevitable. So even if you're not consciously aware that you're sinning, or you're not aware of the sins that you commit, doesn't mean that you're exempt from the consequences of sin itself. The consequences of sin is death. And if there was any child who was innocent, or any person in general that was innocent, none of them will die. If you're telling me that, until they reach the age of accountability, everybody is sinless, then that means until they reach the age of accountability, they're not worthy of death, nor are they under the same curse as Adam was when he was cursed to die. Everybody's pretty much Jesus until they reach the age of accountability. So all of that is wrong. I mean, there was videos that I was watching that they say a baby doesn't become, a baby's cognitive skills doesn't start really developing until literally 3 to 6 months. They're able to distinct the difference between right and wrong, or good and bad, in 3 to 6 months.
Meet Megan. She's 6 months old.
Look how pretty you are.
So is Connor. Hazel is 11 months. And Lyle, just 3 months old. These babies are helping to answer one of life's biggest questions. Are we born knowing right from wrong? So most people think of babies as blank slates, but your experiments say that's not true, that it's not that they have to be taught wrong from right.
From very early ages, we know there's a lot going on in there.
Can you put that in there? Wow, look at that. Good job.
This is the Infant Cognition Center at Yale University, otherwise known as the Baby Lab. Based on over 8 years of studies, researchers here believe that babies are not taught the difference between good and bad, but instead are born knowing it. As these babies grow, their moral beliefs are enhanced by parents and society, but they aren't created by them.
Up goes the curtain.
The studies are conducted with the help of puppet shows. The puppets act out good and bad behavior. Watch as this puppet struggles to open a box. A green bunny comes along and helps to open the box. Green bunny, nice and helpful. Then an orange bunny comes along and slams the box shut. Orange bunny, mean and unhelpful. The actions are repeated a number of times. But what does this mean to 6-month-old Megan? She watches the show and is then presented with the two puppets, the nice green bunny and the mean orange bunny.
Who do you like?
Megan grabs for the green bunny, the nice one. Dr. Karen Wynn runs the Yale Baby Lab. She says by grabbing with her hands, Megan shows she understands the difference between good and bad.
And when it comes to the social world, little Megan here who's hugging, oh, that's cute. She's showing the really typical response of all of the babies that come in. They gravitate towards the helpful characters and the friendly characters, and from very early on there.
But how do we know what she's really thinking?
Well, we don't know the subtleties of what she's really thinking, but what we find is when they look at a social interaction between two individuals, they can tell whether that's a positive one or a negative one, and they're drawn towards the positive character.
Up goes the curtain.
Connor and Soshi watch the same show. Nice bunny, mean bunny. According to the studies, over 80% of the time, the nice bunny ends up in the arms of the baby. Wynn and her team wanted to see if babies even younger than 6 months would recognize good and bad behavior. So they tried this experiment with 3-month-olds. Babies this young don't have the motor skills to grab for anything, so how do they show their preference? It turns out by staring. Babies this young are known to stare longer at things they like, and they avert their eyes from things they don't like.
Noah, who do you like?
Noah looks at the bad orange bunny, then switches his gaze to the good green bunny, and he keeps staring.
They're not old enough to reach, but in their looking, they will orient visually to the positive characters, much, much more so.
They look more at the positive
character. They look lots longer at the positive character.
If that's the case, that babies are able to understand that early on in their development, then that's when people should start teaching them. If your baby is ignorant to right or wrong, it is your fault. That means just because you didn't teach them something doesn't mean they'll forever be exempt from it. If I never taught my child that murdering is wrong, right, and he grow up to be about 6 or 8 or 9 and go around trying to kill people, he's still gonna go to juvie for that, whether he knew or didn't know. I believe God has his morals embedded in us. We will feel something if we do something wrong. There's gonna be something we feel. Before I came to Christ, I felt something within me when I would do wrong. Something like guilt, and that's when I was young. So there's a lot of people that are just acting like they didn't feel any guilt. They didn't feel anything before they knew Christ, or even after they knew of Christ. And I just feel like that's a blatant lie. It's a lie to protect what you worship. I believe the worship of children is very dangerous because children are just people. They're just underdeveloped people, and all people are wicked. A lot of people question or not whether babies are able to comprehend Jesus. And I believe there's a few verses that show me that babies are able to comprehend Jesus. And those verses are Matthew 21:16, where it says, as they said to him, do you hear what these are saying? These referring to the people. And Jesus said to them, yes, have you never read? Out of the mouth of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise. Out of their mouths, God has prepared them to praise him. And there's another verse, speaking of the same thing in Matthew 11:25 through 27. At that time, Jesus declared, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and understanding and revealed them to the little children. For such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. So think about it like this. If God, both the same thing, chooses to reveal himself to somebody, he would. So if God chooses to reveal himself to children or some children, he very well could. Now that doesn't mean that every child or every baby is guaranteed heaven. It's up to God what he chooses. It's up to God who he chooses to save. Although we as humans, people who are emotionally fueled, will want everybody that is disabled or everybody that is a baby and everybody that we feel like are not capable of accepting God would just automatically go to heaven. That's not how that works. Because there's people in foreign countries that may have never heard of God or our God. There's people somewhere that could be isolated, or that could be somewhere where they just don't know about the Bible. So what happens to them? Do they get hell even for their lack of knowledge, even through their ignorance? Or do they get guaranteed heaven? Let's say they believe in rituals. They never heard of God. They just follow the rituals of their family. They're burning babies. They're killing people and having human sacrifices. They never heard of God, let's say. Do those people get guaranteed heaven because of their ignorance? Is ignorance an excuse? Their whole moral compass can be twisted and distorted, where they think wrong is right and right is wrong. How do we handle them? The thing is, humans cannot answer these questions because we don't know everything. We don't know how we will approach these things. Only God knows how he will approach these things. And you have to say, we all should know that not all these people are going to make it to heaven. The reason I say people are born with sin, because a lot of people had a combatants with that, because I did a whole bunch of polls. I asked people. I've even talked to my girlfriend about it. Everybody has, a different take on it. So we have the people who believe babies are sinless. We have the reasoning that because they cannot process what's right and wrong, that they are sinless, that they are pure and they are innocent. And then we have people that don't even believe that we inherited the sins from Adam. That means that people are perfect until they sin. So we have people with different theories, different ideas, different everything. But I'm just going to clarify why I believe what I believe. Now, people can combat it all they want to, but a lot of people who are saying what they are saying is because they're trying to act like they're more knowledgeable than God, that they're more merciful than God. And that's definitely false, because humanity and mercy, you rarely see that. People don't even have mercy on people. The only reason we're so protective of children, because we're so protective over our emotions. We feel like children can do no wrong in our eyes. I don't know why. Maybe it was the world's conditioning. Maybe it's because we've watched so many movies where kids are just doing things like playing on swings and all they want is somebody to love them and care for them. But anybody could want that. What distinguishes a difference besides development between an adult and a child? Children need compassion, adults need compassion. Children need love, adults need love. Children need affection, adults need affection. There's no difference. In this society, we have this conditioning where we kind of give children the benefit of the doubt, so they get away with more. I've even seen children around here riding bikes, and at first glance you would think, oh, it's just a couple of kids riding bikes having fun, until they go into a store and steal something out of it, which I also seen. The same kids riding bikes, and they also said, excuse me. They were polite. They were riding bikes on the sidewalk. We stepped aside, me and my girlfriend. They said, excuse me. They rolled past us. They seemed kind until they stole something. So kids know what people think about them. They know what they can get away with, and they know what they can't get away with. It's all depending on how you view them. But anyway, getting to my point about why I believe that kids and everybody is sinful and have a sinful nature. First of all, David states that everybody has a sinful nature because David stated that he has a sinful nature. And I'm talking about the Bible, David, King David, not myself. It states in Psalms 51:5, "Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity. In sin did my mother conceive me." Then there's also Psalms 53:1. "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt and have committed abominable justice. There is no one who does good." Psalms 53:2. "God has looked down from heaven upon the sons of man to see if there is anyone who understands, who seeks after God. Every one of them has turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one." It's like there's so many verses that are saying pretty much that there is no one good. That means God makes it a clear point multiple times in the Bible that there is no one good, not even one. Does that mean all people? Does that mean only adults? Maybe some teens? It means everybody. No one is good. Not your newborn, not your adult, not your elderly person. No one is good. He makes that abundantly clear. And people still are confused. Why are they confused? It's because of their own feelings. They want people to be good so bad. They want their children to be good so bad. They want to see themselves as good so bad. So there's confusion because of the human emotion, which is why our hearts are so deceitful, because we don't need another to deceive us. We are perfectly fine deceiving ourselves. And that's the problem with humanity, is that we continuously deceive ourselves. Like even Paul teaches that we are children of wrath. In Ephesians 2:3, "Among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind." We are all God's children. God is protective over all of us, not just children. Children are not more important to God than all of us. We are all equally important to God because we have all fallen from grace. We all are in need of God. So I've already shown you that both David and Paul are pretty much saying all of us are no good. All of us were born in sin, and all of us are children of wrath before we were ever children of God. We would like to think we were children of God first. No, because in our heart, we naturally reject God. We all have selfish desires, and it's shown throughout our whole life. How many people have to betray you? How many people have to lie to you? How many people have to hurt you? How many people have to repay evil for you to understand that none of us is good? How much porn do you got to watch? How much people that you have to have the desire to curse out? How much do you have to do to understand that none of the stuff is good? Everybody is evil, period, before they're ever anything else. The thing is, we're constantly on a journey to get closer and closer to God. The desire to get closer to God and the acceptance of Jesus and submitting to Jesus and putting Jesus first in our life and trying our best to imitate Christ, that is what gets us into heaven. This flesh cannot get me into heaven. This flesh cannot do anything for me. When we're talking about children not being sinful, I guess, a lot of people turn to the verse Matthew 18:2-5, where Jesus says, "He called a little child and had him stand among them. And he said, I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Now, in that whole verse, Jesus never said that children are innocent, and he never said that children are sinless, but he did say, humble yourselves. Let me tell you something. Children have humility, and children are teachable. Jesus, as I interpreted it, is telling us to become humble and teachable so that we may understand and we may follow him better. Makes more sense than this saying, oh, Jesus is actually saying that unless we act like a child, we won't make it into heaven. No, because children are immature. And children can be easily deceived and manipulated. How do you think people get kidnapped? This is the thing. We are supposed to be humble and teachable. He is not saying act blind. He is not saying run around and act like we just don't know what we believe in, but we believe in it like we believe in Santa Claus. No, we don't believe in it like we believe in Santa Claus, because Santa Claus don't have a book and we don't know Santa Claus. But we do know Jesus, because the Bible is historical. We're not believing in him on blind faith. We're believing him on knowing faith that does exist. He is real. Those accounts are real. And we're willingly following him. It's not saying be like a little kid. It's saying be humble and teachable as if you were a child. When your child obeys you, that's what he's saying, to be like obedient. I feel like in our hearts, we know when it's our feelings talking or when it's the truth talking. And in humans, sometimes 9 times out of 10, it is your feelings. This is why I believe that whether or not you know you're sinning doesn't really matter. You're still in sin, whether you know it or not. Is because even Paul teaches you that before he knew he was in sin, he was in sin. It didn't change it. It didn't take away the sin because he didn't know he was sinful. He was still in sin. It says in Romans 7 verses 7 through 11. What shall we say then? Is the law sinful? Certainly not. Nevertheless, I would not have known what sin was had it not been for the law. For I would not have known what coveting really was if the law had not said, you shall not covet. But sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, produced me every kind of coveting. For apart from the law, sin was dead. Once I was alive apart from the law. But when the commandment came, sin sprang to life and I died. I found that the very commandment that was intended to bring life actually brought death. For sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, deceived me, and through the commandment put me to death. So Paul is not saying that sin was literally dead when he was ignorant to it. He's speaking figuratively. Before, sin was dead because he thought that he did not sin, but it became alive when he knew. But it didn't change the fact that he was living in sin. So even the people that did not know the law, even before Moses, if they sinned, they sinned. I could go anywhere and not know something is wrong and do wrong. It doesn't change the definition of what's wrong. Stealing doesn't become right when you're ignorant to it. All of us has sin within us, whether we know it or not. Whether we know or not, we all have sin within us. And the wages of sin is death. Period. So even if you sin without knowing, you're still worthy of death. The thing is, we have to learn to rely on God. I feel like a lot of the disagreement comes from human trying to believe that they have the opportunity to change their fate. We can't. We want an excuse. We want a way out. The way out is God. It's not us. We're all determined to go to hell without God. We can't change our fate. A lot of people don't believe we inherited the sin nature from Adam. A lot of people believe that we do not have Adam's sin. They don't believe that we're suffering the consequences of Adam's sin. But then there's verses that go against that. Romans 5:12. Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. There you go. There we go. I don't know how clear it can be that we all have sinned. I don't know how clear that can be, especially with the word all. I feel like a lot of people are just denying the facts because they worship children over God. That's why they're denying it. The thing is, children are a gift. I never changed my mind about that, because God even said children are a blessing. If God allows you to have a child, it's a blessing. But this is a common case of putting your gift over your creator. If it wasn't for him, you wouldn't have a blessing. You wouldn't have a gift. But you would put that above him, which is very, very sad. What good is a gift if you don't appreciate the person who gave it to you? God chooses us. We don't choose God. I feel like God chooses us out of his grace or who his word will be receptive to, because only God knows who will choose him. Technically, God chose us before we as believers could choose him. God will always choose who chooses him because he knows we have the potential to carry out his will. As for those who reject him, he gives them over to their way. It doesn't change the fact that he loves all, but God will not make you choose him because he knows ultimately that some will reject him even if he was to reveal the truth to them. Those that are not his will not hear his call. There's nothing humans can do to make God choose them, because it's not our works that save us, it's God's work. Remember, we all sinned and rejected God before we knew him. But once truth came into our hearts, what we did and how we responded shows if we're really his sheep or not. It's not by deeds and it's not by prayer. It's by faith and not by sight. Anyone can pray without faith. Anyone can confess without guilt. But not everyone can accept Jesus Christ and his words as truth. Once we accept truth, our growth in relationship with God begins. Not by our works, but by his works. We are able to be reconciled with him. The verses that support the point of what I just said, why I feel this way, is 1 Corinthians 2:14. But a natural man does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them because they are spiritually appraised. In Ephesians 1:4, just as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we would be holy and blameless before him in love. Ephesians 1:5, he predestined us to adoption as sons through Jesus Christ to himself, according to the kind intention of his will. In Ephesians 1:6, to the praise of the glory of his grace, which he freely bestowed on us in the beloved. God knows us before we know him. He knew us before the foundation of the earth. So ultimately, there could be babies that went to hell. You want to know why? Because he knew them before they were born, and he knows what they will do. He ultimately knows who will reject him and who won't. He knows the end of our lives. Even me, can go to hell. He knows the beginning from the end, and we forget that. We don't. We just see an innocent little child. But God is outside of space and time. God does not see things the same way humans do. He does not have the same emotions as humans do. He does not feel the same, nor does he think the same. That's why he says, my ways are not your ways, and your ways are not my ways, because we do not think, nor feel, nor rationalize the same as God does. And we need to understand that. Because if children were so innocent, what about what happened to the Canaanites? What about God killing off most of the Canaanites? What about Sodom and Gomorrah? What about the flood? Three events where children and women and everybody has died. Babies too, babies included. What about the death of David's child? The baby he had with Bathsheba. That child died because of what? Because of David's sin. Now, that child may have went to heaven because David said, I shall go to him. But do you get the point? I believe it is safer to say that whoever is in heaven, God wants them there. And who's ever in hell, there's a reason for that too. Regardless of age, gender, disability, or deformity. Wherever those people end up, it is God's choice. Regardless of whether or not a child willfully committed a sin, they still bear the consequences of humanity's sinful nature. I mean, I know a lot of people will combat what I said with a particular verse in Deuteronomy 1:39 where it says, and as for your little ones who you said will become a prey, and your children who today have no knowledge of good or evil, they shall go in there, and to them I will give it, and they shall possess it. I believe this. God knows that babies, or at least young children, are sometimes unable to decipher good from evil because they have not developed enough to completely comprehend it. Therefore, they are not punished by the sins of their parents if the parents or anyone made them do something they had no knowledge of being wrong. So kids and babies that don't have the knowledge of right or wrong are not guilty of sinful actions, but that does not exempt them from having a sinful nature. Although they have not consciously or intentionally violated God's law yet, doesn't change the fact that they eventually will do because of the inherent sinful nature of human beings. The reason there's no age of accountability is because there is no certain age when we violate God's law or intentionally sin against Him and others. There's young kids doing crimes today and even toddlers that do evil things. So sin doesn't come at a particular age. We would just like to believe so due to the way we are conditioned to think of children to the point we describe them as if we were describing Jesus. People today need to understand that God has a better reason for what He does than us. Abortions are not right. Most of abortions anyway is due to inconvenience. It's not even due to rape. And even if you were raped and you're having a baby, have the baby and put it up for adoption if you don't want it. But do not kill the baby, because you're not killing it for any other reason besides selfish reasons, which is why in human nature we're selfish. Anything done to our inconvenience, we complain about, whine about, and do everything in our power to change it, even if there's nothing wrong with it. So, I just wanted to make this video to say that children, adults, teens, toddlers, anybody can go to hell or heaven, and that we need to learn to put Jesus first before our own minds. I love you all. God bless you all. Bye.